Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to your favorite weekly horoscope, this time for December 13th through the 19th of 2021. We are in the final weeks of the year. We are almost in 2022. If you're like mentally not in next year already, I don't know what you're doing. Last week was a little bit crazier than I thought. That Moon, Venus, Pluto conjunction was like, for me, it was intense, but in like the fun, good way. I don't know about you guys. I'm sure most of you are going to say it was pretty awful, but last week was a little wild, but it wasn't a lot, right? It was just that Mars square Jupiter, Venus, Pluto thing. But this week we have so much going on. Whoops. I want to show this, not the chart. There we go. This week we have a lot going on. Like how I said we ended last week on Sunday, Mars being at that last degree, Mercury being at that last degree. We start Monday off on the 13th with Mars ingressing into Sagittarius, Mercury ingressing into Capricorn. And during the day, the moon's going to be in Aries, making a square to Venus and making a sextile to Jupiter. So Monday's really interesting because the energy like truly shifts as we kind of wake up, right? Number one, let's talk about Mars going into Sagittarius. I mean, I'm so biased when it comes to like fire placements and everything like that. Like when Jupiter goes into Aries, you guys are never going to hear the end of it with me. But I like Mars in Sagittarius is a little bit fun, right? Mars being about action, drive, energy, ambition. Mars is fights, conflicts, and like with Mars in Scorpio, there's this self-fueled like Mars, right? Mars is in its own domain. Mars is in kind of control of itself. Mars has, and maybe a good way to put it would be like personal autonomy. And Mars can make its own decisions. Mars is a malefic planet, so sometimes it doesn't always make the best decisions. But what I really like about Mars going into Sagittarius is that Mars has to do its job no matter what, right? Mars is fighting. Mars is going to be, what is energizing you? How are you going about your life, right? Like, how are you conquering your own world? Mars is in Jupiter's house, and it has to use Jupiter's tools now. Jupiter's tools include having faith, being idealistic, having a vision. And the way that I really look at Mars in Sagittarius is it's like something that I'm going to kind of talk about as we get into Wednesday, because as you could tell, Mars is going to get to the South Node this week. So like, and I think I talked a little bit about this maybe last week or maybe in my horoscopes on Patreon, which if you want monthly horoscopes, the January 2022 horoscopes are already on my Patreon. I don't know why you guys aren't on that yet, but Mars going from Scorpio into Sagittarius is one thing, but then it immediately hits the South Node. And we're going to talk about that when it actually happens on Wednesday. But like, I really like Scorpio being so much about like this, like, emotional pain, this depth, this sorrow. And then we get to Sag season where it's like time to think optimistically, time to plan for the new year, right? Time to be like, what can we really do to look for hope for into it's super funny that holiday seasons really start around Sagittarius season, where there's this jovial sense of spirituality, faith, belief, mythology, storytelling, right? And Mars being about action and drive is like kind of like using the stories, using the mythology, using, whatever. What I really like about Sagittarius, and by the time you're watching this, you've probably seen my Jupiter and Pisces video. So, because that's going to be, it's not released while as I'm recording this, but by the time you're watching this, Jupiter and Pisces video will be up. I talk about this in my Jupiter and Pisces video. Sagittarius is so linear, right? It's like, how do I just get to point B? How do I just get to point B? Like, what is your aim? What is your target? You just kind of go. And I think as Mars goes into Sagittarius, like, it's not about saying, hey, like, are you going? How fast are you going? It's just go. Don't think about it. Just go. We're going to keep talking about that. But as Mars is in Jupiter's sign, it's not about going because everything's in your favor and everything makes sense. But it's kind of like you kind of have to take a leap of faith. Like Mars in Sagittarius is you gotta believe that you can do it before you'll ever actually do it, right? And there's no real other way to kind of Mars in Sagittarius is so explorative, right? Sagittarius is a mutable sign. It's all about change. It's all about adaptation. It's seeking out. It's very visionary. Like, go on an adventure. Go for it, right? Like, there's no need to, stop and think about anything. Mercury also goes into Capricorn on Monday. So Monday, again, it's like you're going, it's time to go, it's time to check out. For a lot of people, that might be like this new adventure. For a lot of other people, Mars and Sag, it's time to avoid shit. It's just time to be like, I don't want to deal with this shit. I need to avoid everything. But then Mercury goes into Capricorn. Mercury, say it all the time, communication, are the way that we rationalize things. And I really like saying rationale, or the way that we rationalize things, because like Jupiter makes us really think in this really big, larger than life way, versus Mercury makes us really concentrate on the details, right? Mercury's going into Capricorn. The details matter here. This is Saturn's sign. This is about, like, is the details when it comes to supply chains, right? We're learning this with the COVID pandemic. The details matter, right? If, like, for example, in the the meat packing industry, there was like a meat shortage. It wasn't because there was a shortage of cows or anything like that, but because the packaging companies are so, like, I think monopolized and concentrated, and they stopped it packaging meat, because like all of the farmers, they all go to the same meat packaging centers. That got shut down, and so it caused this whole supply chain crisis, right? Little tiny details like matter, right? And I know maybe that's not the best example of a tiny detail, but I would look at Mercury and Capricorn as Mercury is about logistics. Mercury is about looking at like how a system operates. Like, I really like the Mercury and Virgo aspect of that. But as Mercury's in Capricorn, the way that we're communicating, the way that we're thinking, it's that Saturn stuff. Like, it needs to be efficient. It needs to be effective. There needs to be some type of system. There needs to be some type of rule. There needs to be some type of Mercury in Capricorn is very dry. It's very cold, right? It's almost kind of like dry and cold humor. But I think as Mercury's in Capricorn, like, we're going to be kind of just like serious for a while. Venus is in Capricorn on top of Pluto at this point. Mercury being in Capricorn is so, like, our mindset is just really in this serious, for some people, if you have like a night chart, or like Capricorn rules your 8th house, maybe you're feeling like trapped and feeling like you have to just like do things by the system and that there's no way out of it. And, for other people, like day chart people who actually like the Saturn stuff, it's like, kind of like having structure, having a system that can kind of help you operate more smoothly. So as Mars goes into Sagittarius and Mercury goes into Capricorn, it's kind of like, well, here's a good example, running. I never used to run. I did it for a little while in 2020 when, there's nothing else better to do. But something I learned about running is like, you kind of really have to, like Mars and Sag, right? Like, you kind of just have to go, and Mercury and Capricorn is like, I wouldn't necessarily say it needs to be about consistency, but you have to kind of like have a plan mentally, right? Like, have a conversation that you stick to in your head. Like, keep it simple, keep it straight. Like, just keep going, just keep going. In Mercury and Capricorn, like, you can't just like be distracted about things with, well, I don't want to say about distracted about things, because also when you're running, you get in the zone and you get to think about stuff. Anyway, maybe that's not the best analogy. Maybe my analogies are off on this horoscope. But anyway, Mercury and Capricorn, you're just going to be a little bit more focused on the serious shit. We're going to keep talking about that as time goes on. But also on Monday, the moon is going to be making that square to Venus and that sextile to Jupiter, and the moon's in Aries. I think the moon being in Aries just kind of confirms a lot of, the stuff I was saying about Mars and Sag. Like, the moon, it's our emotions, right? Like, what we're kind of investing ourselves into at any kind of given point, subconsciously or subconsciously, right? And the moon being in Aries, like, we're really kind of like emotionally charged up. We're really invested into our actions and what we're doing. Moon in Aries, maybe a little bit aggressive, maybe a little bit blunt. Mercury in Capricorn is very blunt, very dry, very cut. Or what's that saying? I like the cut of your jib. I feel like that's a very Mercury and Capricorn saying. But the moon in Aries just like really wanting to be like, go, go, go. Let me put this here. Let me put this here. And Mars and Sag, I think is fueling that fire. But as the moon squares Venus, there's this sense of, again, the moon in Aries wants to kind of like just go and do things, but the moon squaring Venus in Capricorn, as that's slowing down. It's like, again, maybe that system that we've done things with. I've talked about this with Venus retrograde, the Venus retrograde in Capricorn happening. Like, we're changing the way that we, like, the rule book that we play by, right? I feel like this moon in Aries squaring Venus is kind of realizing that, like, maybe your plan isn't working all that well. Like, Mars and Sag also too, going and hitting the South Node. Like, Mars and Sag, you might just be kind of winging it and going. That's not to say that's always going to work. I think the Mars and Sag on the South Node, we're going to talk about this as we get into Wednesday, but I just think as the moon squares Venus, you might be kind of realizing something isn't necessarily getting the result that you want. No matter how hard you kind of put a square block into a round hole, it's not going to fit, right? And so I feel like there might be that kind of realization on Monday as things kind of switch. Then we get to Tuesday, and the big thing on Tuesday, I mean, it's just the moon going into Taurus. It's going to make that square to Saturn and conjoin Uranus. Like, every moon in Taurus transit has been, except if you have been watching my videos for a while, you might have remembered when this was maybe a couple months ago, where I talked about the Saturn-Uranus square being so separated that the moon transits, it's like the moon would conjoin Saturn, and then it would take forever, like a couple hours to like hit Uranus, right? And so there was this kind of like gap in between things versus, we're almost at the Saturn-Uranus square. Like, we're not very far away from it. So as we go into Tuesday, that moon is going to conjoin Saturn and then square Saturn and then immediately conjoin Uranus. So that's a very like back-to-back hit. The first thing is the moon goes into Taurus, right? So the thing is the moon's in Aries, will be super charged up. Maybe, the other thing I would say with the moon in Aries squaring Venus too is like doing something no matter what, but maybe just not really liking the final product. Like Venus is about to retrograde. We're going to kind of change the order of operations, maybe is a good way to put it. And maybe Monday we realize that. But as the moon goes into Taurus, there's this sense of, I think the moon going into Taurus wants to relax. The moon going into Taurus wants to slow down, and the moon in Taurus wants to kind of gather things up. I think the difficult part about that, though, is that the moon is making an application to Saturn, or an application to squaring Saturn. This doesn't look like very comfortable, right? Like Saturn's in the superior position. Like the moon in Taurus wants to be comfortable, wants to lounge, wants to just relax. But as it kind of applies to the square with Saturn, there's this, uncomfortability with just relaxing, right? It's like, what's that? It's super like, what's that? Like, how could you... Like how people will like, how could you do this as an American, but like there's people starving in Africa or something like that. It's like there's this kind of like feeling of like dread and guilt like above you almost. Like Saturn, there's a sense of authority. There's this sense of like, weight almost on top of you. And I think as the moon's in Taurus, as you're trying to on Tuesday maybe relax or kind of gather yourself, it may not necessarily be under the conditions that you want to. It's not like, oh, I'm going to like slow down and get my shit together. It's like, no, you got like 5 minutes to like take a rest and get your shit together. Then it's time to do something else. Because the moon making that square to Saturn, there's something about, I would say, resting or, concentrating your energy. It's not really going to work all that well. And then the moon's going to conjoin Uranus right after that. So there's this kind of like explosive, unstable thing that's going on. I don't know if you guys are aware, but like the Saturn-Uranus square is about to happen. So the sense of like Saturn in Aquarius, you trying to get your shit together, you being more responsible, or the responsibilities you have to take care of, it's squaring Uranus. There's a lot of instability there. Like there's something shifty kind of going on. And I think that moon squaring Saturn, conjoining Uranus is maybe you feeling like, okay, I see where this maybe is heading. I see where this is going. A great example is, I just talked about this on my Patreon too, but the Millennium Tower in San Francisco. It's literally a tower on this super shaky ground. And I think, honestly, that will be a pretty big thing for the Saturn-Uranus square. We'll see. But, it's kind of like, hey, if you lived in that Millennium Tower and that shit's leaning over, are you going to just like sit there or are you going to like leave? And I think this moon in Taurus is like, hey, like this building's coming down. Are you going to sit there or are you going to leave? But the moon conjoining Uranus squaring Saturn is like, you may want to sit there, but what if you got like an evacuation notice? What if you got pushed out, right? Moon conjoining Uranus is you might want to sit there and be comfortable, but you got to go. You're going to have to get uncomfortable and things are going to be unstable. And so Tuesday is just kind of like, it's not horrible. I just think if you are trying to like resist change, it's not happening. Like this is the perfect example of like, if you're at a point in your life where you're resisting change in a lot of ways, you're going to probably get like, this will be much harder versus if you kind of just like accept it and go, okay, I guess this is changing. Tuesday will feel much smoother. But yeah, expect Tuesday to feel very sudden and jerky is a good way to put it. Then we get to Wednesday and that's when we get the Mars South Node conjunction. I love this. I'm so excited for the Mars South Node conjunction. I live for that shit. And I want to talk about why. That South Node, right? We are getting ready to get that South Node out of Sagittarius. By January, there's going to be, the nodes are shifting into Taurus and Scorpio, which I also have a video already on my Patreon about that you guys are going to be getting way later on. But the nodes are going into Scorpio and Taurus here in January. And you have to think, the South Node has been through Sagittarius, the North Node's been through Gemini since like May of 2020. It's almost 2 years at this point, right? And it's been quite a 2 years. The South Node in Sagittarius, the sense of like our vision, our beliefs, you know, the way that we idealize things, what kind of motivates us, almost in a sense. It's really changed. North Node's in Gemini, right? We've been learning more. We've been questioning more. We've been understanding more, right? North Node in Gemini is like communicating more even. And the South Node in Gemini is like kind of like assuming less. And as Mars conjoins the South Node, and I've talked about the South Node being this drain, it's exhaustive. It's something that you kind of have to get rid of. It's like with the North Node in Gemini, when you learn something new that goes against maybe what your beliefs are, or maybe challenges your beliefs, and that, you know, shows you that you're wrong, you have to let go of that past, you know, belief or expectation. That's what that North Node in Gemini, South Node in Sagittarius is. And Mars is just letting you cut shit, right? I talked about the whole, I think it was like last week or maybe the week before that, where you like hold your arms against the door, then you like walk away and your arms lift up. This is the same thing. Like Mars in Sag is like, I would almost say, have you guys ever seen Up? I hope you've seen Up. It's like that scene where like he has to cut just enough, where he has to get rid of all of his furniture to like actually set sail on the house. And it's like his like wife's furniture, and it's like super sad. And that whole movie is so sad. That's kind of like Mars on the South Node in Sagittarius. What do you got to get rid of? And just fucking, well, again, it's like Mars conjoining the South Node it's releasing. It's not necessarily like, a good way to look at it too is surrendering. I talked about last week of more of the purging thing of hoarders, right? I would analogize the Mars South Node conjunction as much more of like, what does it feel like to be more free, right? The South Node is a drain and it is exhaustive, but it's the South Node on Sagittarius. And the reason I was so excited to talk about this is, like I've said, I'm a huge Deftones fan. And like the Drive Far Away, the literally, well, like just metal in general, like there's something, I've gotten a few people into this of like driving in the desert, blaring metal. If you even know that feeling, like there's something very, releasing about it, right? Driving, just even like if you've never done a solo trip, just driving in the desert, blaring whatever your favorite music is, like it's better than therapy, I swear to God. But Mars conjoining the South Node is like, you just need to go. And I feel like the South Node thing is like, even though releasing things is so hard, there's this sense of freedom that, like, this is kind of like, for example, when you know the price that you have paid for something, and so you understand the value of it. And I feel like Mars in the South Node is like, you're paying the price, but also feeling the like relinquishing yourself of something and feeling the freedom that's there, right? Like we're done. Like it's time to move on. Mars and South Node. It's like and now that Mars is in Sagittarius, we're moving on to something else. We have a new adventure we're going on. We're going down a new path, right? But that South Node is like, what baggage are you releasing? What are you getting rid of? And I think also too, it's not necessary. Like I think at this point we're already on the journey. I think the South Node is like, you know, if you've ever done a road trip by yourself, it's not that first hour. It's not the first hour of the road trip where it gets deep. It's like the middle of it. Like you're already on the road trip. You're doing your thing. You've already made a stop maybe, and you're like a couple hours deep. And then that's when you start like really thinking about stuff, because you're really in like your like, I don't want to say like tunnel vision, but you're in your like, what's that? I just said it earlier. When you're really focused. But anyway, Wednesday just seems like we're moving on, but it's not necessarily like this bad thing, because something I love about the South Node is that it's kind of like a pivot. It's literally like a low point. And I think as Mars is on here, this is kind of like the first step on your journey is always the hardest, I feel like. And well, I don't want to say like that's fucking true. This is that almost. And I think maybe that first step is easier if you let go of any like baggage or like beliefs, expectations. Like you gotta get rid of all that shit to kind of keep going. And I think with Mercury and Venus and Capricorn, it's just like having a very clear mentality about what you value, about where your mind's at. And Mars and Sagittarius is like, you don't have to really believe in yourself to do anything. Like you kind of just have to do it. The belief about it comes way later oftentimes, right? There's so many people like that you don't really actually have to believe in yourself to accomplish anything really in life. You just kind of have to do it, and then you'll believe in yourself way later on. That's coming from a Leo. But that brings us into Thursday. Thursday, Moon's going to be making that trine to Venus and squaring Jupiter as it's going through Taurus. I'm loving Thursday. And then the Moon will ingress into Gemini and immediately make an opposition to Mars. So Thursday's got a lot of lunar transits, right? What I love about lunar transits is I often think of them as like when you have like your favorite TV show, there's episodes that like big things happen, right? Those are planetary transits. But then there's episodes where like little conversations here happen and then there happen. It kind of builds up this huge context. Like those are the lunar transits hitting like different planets, building up to a big like event, right? That's why I kind of really like lunar transits. But as we get into Thursday, on Thursday, the Moon, let's kind of rewind here. Earlier in the morning is going to make the trine to Venus. The Moon will trine Venus and square Jupiter. Where the Moon's in Taurus, right? We're wanting some solid ground. We're wanting some stability. We're looking to soak in that value. We're looking to soak in, what we can enjoy. I think the Moon trining Venus is like knowing what we got to change or like utilizing what we can, but the Moon squaring Jupiter too is maybe not like seeing like the bigger picture here. I think the Moon in Taurus squaring Jupiter in Aquarius is like, again, knowing, or it's like when you want to do something, but I'm not on my analogy game today. I just think the Moon squaring Jupiter is like not seeing the bigger picture, not being very hopeful, but the Moon shining Venus is like, sticking to the plan anyway and enjoying it for what it is. I just think the Moon in Taurus squaring Jupiter will be hard to like, again, maybe be very like optimistic or positive, but Moon in Taurus would be like, it's still a decent day. It's still a good day in the morning, that is. But then we get to later on, and then the Moon goes into Gemini and then immediately hits the Mars, right? And the Moon goes into Gemini, conjoins the North Node and hits Mars in the South Node. This is that clarity. Like, Moon goes into Gemini. We're understanding how we feel because maybe we're communicating it. Maybe we're talking about it. We're thinking about it more. The Moon's on the North Node where we're blah, 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 just talking all the time. And it's going to go opposite Mars and Sagittarius where it's like, I think it's going to, I used to be addicted to cigarettes, and I remember, and like I've smoked a few cigarettes every now and then. I used to be smoking like 2 packs a day, but I remember when I had to first, like I'd been smoking cigarettes my whole life, and when I quit, you kind of like when you quit any type of addiction, you kind of have to go, what am I going to do in those moments that I'm weak? What am I going to do in those moments that like I don't have like a plan? And like the Moon in Gemini on the North Node opposite Mars and Sagittarius is like, check in, like, hey, are you like, this is that moment. Are you going to choose something different? Or are you like that Moon in Gemini opposite Mars and Sag? It's going to be easy to like want to avoid things. There's going to be this kind of, like when you have planets on the North and South Node, that's like an extreme thing coming up. And this is why I brought up the addiction. Cause like your first day quitting something, like it's not easy. Like you're pretty much in a fucking mental hellscape. And I think this Moon in Gemini, it's like, well, you're going, well, what if I just have one? Or what if I just do this? And Mars and Sagittarius is like, I got it, like, trying to give yourself all these excuses, all these reasons. I think this Moon in Gemini, and here's the thing, this is building up to the full Moon in Gemini. We have so much going on this week. Mars goes into Sag, Mercury goes into Capricorn, full Moon in Gemini, Mars joins the South Node, and we have Venus stationing retrograde. If I didn't go over all of the big transits, but I think as the Moon goes in the North Node, it's like, you gotta have that conversation with yourself. This is that like, so Mars and Sagittarius on the South Node is like, you might kind of like black out and just kind of go. Like if you were like, I think I've talked about this before, but like if you were like blacked out of like you in the moment, just because you were doing something, maybe like, again, you didn't like consciously choose to not be in something, but maybe you're like, I don't know, anxiety came out of nowhere and you just kind of like did something anyway, wasn't really even thinking about it. That's very Mars and Sag on the South Node. The Moon going into Gemini is kind of like realizing you just did that, realizing and checking in. And it's kind of like, hey, are you aware? Are you here or are you somewhere else? I think this is, and I also think too, the Moon in Gemini, it's kind of like Mars and Sag can be like, oh, I just have this dream. I'm just going to go for it. It's fine. I'm just going to wing it. It's fine. And that's great. But the Moon in Gemini is very like, hey, do you have enough gas? Do you even know where you're going? Do you have like, it's just asking the right questions, right? And so I think the biggest thing here is it's going to be very loud. It's like there's something about the mutable signs, Gemini, Sag, Pisces, Virgo, it's very mental. Like it's just a bunch of yelling. I always think if I think of Pisces, Virgo, Sag, and Gemini all in a room, I think of everyone just talking over each other and no one listening to each other. It's just loud noises. And that's what a lot of this looks like, right? Like Gemini and Sagittarius is like two people talking at each other, not with each other. So just kind of, I would say, honestly, on Thursday, as the moon goes into Gemini opposite Mars, it's going to be it's probably have a lot of anxiety. You probably might get in a couple of verbal conflicts with people. The biggest thing here, though, is the moon's in Gemini opposite Mars and Sag. Like, where are you going? Like, well, also, too, for example, the up analogy, he gets rid of all this furniture, he's flying, but like imagine that's you, and then like now that you're actually flying, now you have to go, where are you going? Because now you're flying, and now you got to figure out where you're gonna land, or how to navigate yourself in the sky, which comes with its own challenges. But that's Thursday, right? But then we get into Friday. Friday does not have a lot going on. Same thing with Wednesday. I mean, like Wednesday is not really that big of a deal. But Friday, it's just the moon like making this trine to Saturn as it's building up towards this full moon that we really have on Saturday. So let's do this. We get to Friday. Moon trining Saturn. That moon in Gemini trining Saturn Aquarius. Shit's starting to click. It's starting to make sense here. Venus is not even moving, by the way. Have I even said that? Venus is not moving a muscle and is totally stationary this whole week, which is a good way to put it. I would say you could read as an omen of Venus is in the middle and is about to start moving backwards. But that moon in Gemini trining Saturn in Aquarius, it's like something might make sense in your head, but then when you say it out loud, it doesn't. This is like you've said it out loud enough, you've thought about it to where things are starting to click. You've got a plan together. It makes sense. You're communicating the right things. You're understanding. And also, this is the moon, right? Like our emotions. It's in Gemini. This is kind of really like communicating and understanding how we feel about something. And it's trining Saturn. Like this is constructive. This is helpful for getting our shit together, to put it in one way. But Friday is really just the moon trining Saturn. I would just assume like a lot of shit starts really clicking. But that leads us to Saturday. Saturday, full moon in Gemini. And as you notice, this might look a little bit confusing, but this is a trine / sextile to Jupiter. So let's look at that and the reason why. Let's actually get to the exact point. So this will be great, like here in Vegas. Have you ever seen like the full moon rise in Vegas? It's so beautiful. This full moon is exactly, the sun's going to be sextiling Jupiter and the moon's going to be trining Jupiter. Jupiter, well, and Jupiter is also involved with this too, because this is a Jupiter ruled lunation. The sun's in Jupiter sign. This is also the first lunation in Sagittarius and Gemini that's not an eclipse. So think back, we haven't had a lunation in Sagittarius and Gemini that wasn't an eclipse since like November, December of 2019. 2019. So it's been a while. So sun's in Sagittarius, right? Sun's also at that galactic center point I talked about last week. We're getting deep. We're getting into it. And that full moon in Gemini, like, the sun in Sagittarius is so kind of like our egos are attached to the story. They're attached to the mythology. They're attached to like the passion to going forward. And that full moon in Gemini, I feel like is that clarity. And it's trining Jupiter. Jupiter is that hope. Jupiter is that vision. Jupiter is that what's next. And like Jupiter's about to go into Pisces. I hope you guys remember what it felt like going into May and how good things felt. And like, I know I've been like, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of hard transits that we're going to have, but like Jupiter's about to go into Pisces. So like what I would say with this is like, this is that moment where you need to like have that conversation of like, you know, you could wing shit all day long, right? That's easy. But like, are you going to like actually believe and trust and take that? Like, this is taking a leap of faith, in my opinion. Jupiter's about to go into Pisces where there is going to be a lot more hope. There is going to be a lot more like things to look forward to and things to enjoy. But I really think this full moon in Gemini is kind of like, you having to make that up for yourself. Like this is trining Jupiter. Like Jupiter in Aquarius has been so like it doesn't really matter what side of the spectrum you're on in kind of any argument, but Saturn in Aquarius is like there's been these societal restrictions in a sense, and this kind of heavy weighted blanket is a good way to put it. Maybe not a blanket, this heavy weight on our communities and society, right? And Jupiter in Aquarius this whole year is, no matter how shit it's been, no matter how bad things are with people, with Jupiter in Capricorn, it was a little bit different. Jupiter in Capricorn was like, we all have stimuluses and this is horrible, but whatever. But Jupiter in Aquarius is like, come on, guys, let's just make the best of it anyway. Like, come on, it's fine. Like, this is what we got to do to make things better. And I feel like Jupiter at that last degrees with this full moon in Gemini is kind of like getting that, right? You have to be the one that kind of like makes it okay for yourself, makes things good for yourself. You got to be the one that kind of like sees the vision, right? You can't just like hope for positivity to happen. You kind of have to create it. And I really think this full moon in Gemini trining Jupiter is like, honestly, a lot of hope hitting you. And it's not like this, oh my God, everything's going to be great and amazing. But it's kind of like, you know, sun is in Sag, like, right? Like you're already kind of like in it. Like you're already like taking these next big moves. This full moon in Gemini is like, oh, wow, I kind of do see where things are kind of going. And it's trining Jupiter in Aquarius. You're like, there is something that's bigger. There is something there are going to be better days. There is something to look forward to. It just has to be about like you kind of maybe realizing that for yourself. But this full moon in Gemini is really, in my opinion, having the conversation, things making sense, things clicking. It's time to like move forward. It's time to get excited. And I know that's kind of counterintuitive to everything that I've been maybe talking about, but this is a Venus retrograde. This isn't a Mars retrograde square Saturn like in 2020, right? We get to Sunday. Venus stations retrograde. You should have watched my Venus retrograde by now, Venus retrograde videos. And if you did watch them, thank you. But Venus stations retrograde on Sunday the 19th. The moon will ingress into Cancer, go opposite Mercury at the same time. Sun will sextile Jupiter. But let's talk about that. We get to this full moon in Gemini, and then Venus stations retrograde. So this is the thing. It's not everything's always bad. Even the bad transits, right? The way I look at Venus, it's like this full moon in Gemini is like things click, and then Venus stations where it's like, it's time to make that switch. It's time to make that change, right? Venus in Capricorn is maybe you've done things by a certain system or a certain rule book for some time, but Venus is on Pluto. It's like, that's not working. What's real? What's raw? What's empowering? What are you scared of? Honestly, what are you scared of? And why are you scared? I feel like Venus retrograding on Pluto is like, for a lot of people, this is going to be changing your relationship to fear, changing your relationship to like how you manage fear. Venus in Capricorn too. What systems have you implemented in your life that you enjoy and that work and that don't work? And I think as Venus stations retrograde, it's just where that full moon in Gemini is like, oh, we understand where we're going. We understand what's next. Venus retrograding is like, oh, our values are starting to change now. Venus retrograding in Capricorn. Venus has been in shadow for quite some time now, since November 18th. This has almost been a month now. We're going to be going back over everything that we've been doing and examining, and we're going to be reevaluating it. We're going to be not re-examining it, but we're going to be kind of saying, hey, is this what I want? Is this what works for me? Right? On Sunday, the moon ingresses into Capricorn and goes opposite Mercury. The moon goes into Cancer and goes opposite Mercury in Capricorn. That moon in Cancer check-in of like, hey, this is how I feel. This is what I need. This is, the moon in Cancer is very sensitive and it's very in check with its emotions. But being opposite Mercury in Capricorn is like, for example, sometimes you have to communicate your needs, like at work, for example, and it might be hard, but like moon in Cancer is like, hey, I am going through this. I need this. Like, it's not about, being emotional or making it personal. Like Mercury in Capricorn is the moon in Cancer opposite Mercury in Capricorn is being able to communicate what your needs are, but like Mercury in Capricorn, right? Like you have like a list. It's like straight to the point. It's not all emotional. So it just seems like a lot of clarity, in my opinion, of like, this is, again, it's not like, oh, I'm having this value change and I'm seeing things differently. I think it's like very Saturnian. You're just kind of clear about it and you're kind of doing it. It's kind of like when if you work for a company, they give you like, hey, this is our new protocol. This is the way you do it. You go, okay. And that's it. That's how it is. So I think, this is really also too, again, if you're not already mentally in 2022, like it's time to kind of check in and you should already be there by now. But then also on Sunday, the sun is going to sextile Jupiter. So again, this is positive. This is hopeful. This is at least looking forward to the best. So Venus might be retrograde on Pluto. So again, maybe you see the worst in the news, more supply chain stuff, more lockdown stuff. They're probably going to overturn Roe versus Wade or make it very complicated to where you're probably going to see riots and stuff like that. It'll probably be pretty crazy, but again, like you got to do what you got to do to make sure you're getting through life the best way you can, right? That's what's important. But that's Sunday. We get into next week. Two things. Saturn square Uranus. This will be round 3 of 4. No, round 4 or 5? Because we have one more next year. But anyway, Saturn squaring Uranus. Honestly, this shouldn't be anything new, sudden change. And the Mercury's also going to sextile Neptune. Really isn't even that big of a deal. Next week is, I think, really settling in with everything that we've dealt with this week. Everything that we've changed is we just deal with it next week. And Saturn squaring Uranus, it's like, well, when we make changes, sometimes sudden things happen and things become a little unstable and we'll just have to deal with that. So that's just life though, I guess. So that's what I got for you guys this week. I really hope you enjoyed this horoscope. Please give me a like if you like this video. It really helps me out and puts me into the algorithm, which I super would appreciate if you guys would support me that way. Anyway, thank you guys for being here. I love and appreciate every single one of you guys, and I'll be seeing you next week.